First up in this 30-minute program, we hear from the CIOs leading NASA's digital transformation. And later, we'll get the industry perspective. Joining me now is Neil Rogers. He's NASA's Deputy Chief Information Officer for Operations, and Mike Witt, NASA's Chief Information Security Officer. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Neil, I'm going to start with you. What's the core mission behind NASA's digital transformation and IT modernization?
Well, we're here to enable the mission. NASA has very ambitious goals ahead of us, the moon, the Mars, science exploration. And so as we enable the mission, we have to pivot with the agency. And so the operating model that we've functioned under for many years has served us well. But it's time for us to take a hard look at how to position ourselves in the CIOs organization to change, look inward at how we're operating, how we can do it better, making sure we're in alignment with where the mission wants to go across NASA, and being responsive to that. So what we're doing is the traditional model that we've had. We have 10 field centers that have been very center-centric in the past since NASA was formed in terms of delivering IT to those local mission elements. And so and been very successful at doing that. But over time, we've pivoted a little more towards enterprise solutions, more corporate solutions, and get away from some of the uniqueness that have existed at the centers. And so there's appropriate uniqueness, and there's things that we can do and remove the duplication and bring the skill sets, the energies, the passions, the innovations together to benefit all of NASA, I think, in a more optimized fashion.
And you said it's for enabling the mission.
Yes.
How does transforming your IT systems enable the mission? Things like Artemis.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's Artemis has it's a very, very large program with lots of partners that we tap to get. You saw the launch that just occurred. We've got to provide responsive IT to help. The centers are more interdependent than they've been. Artemis spans not only contractor partners, but centers. And so making it easy, making it secure for us to collaborate with both internally across the field centers, across our organizations, as well as with our partners, that's the main thing, is secure solutions that enable collaboration and are responsive. And obviously, there's a cost efficiency that we need to keep an eye on as well.
And Neil mentioned security. That's all you, Mike. So in these organizational changes and in this integration that's going on now at NASA, what are the security issues that you're having to deal with?
I would say, it's the typical security issues that other agencies see as well as private sector. But as Neil kind of mentioned, we're trying to take away from the way that we've traditionally operated and again, bring that more to an enterprise approach. So it's really what I'm doing is consolidating our cybersecurity teams to be able to deliver across the enterprise as a whole, as opposed to focusing, I'll just say, just on one center, if you will, around that. That allows our team to spread out more, to give more focus and more capabilities, if you will, across all of the centers by just kind of focusing kind of the one-on-one on that. It really allows our teams to spread out and also be able to take on new opportunities that they haven't had. Whereas sometimes where they may be working something locally at one center, now they get to stretch maybe and take on other responsibilities that they are not used to or accustomed to, that actually grows them over time and allows us to grow our people so that we can have them basically help us later on in the future as well.
And Neil, as you mentioned, you're in the process of integrating all those research centers and other facilities. How is that affecting your workforce and leadership roles?
Well, it's very key to it, because Mike mentioned from his question, the workforce is persistent. They're still at the centers, right? They are there with our mission counterparts. We're not moving people around. They're staying where they are. So it's a matter of kind of realigning their reporting structures so that we can take advantage of what they've been doing locally, all the innovation, all that knowledge of the specific missions that are accomplished at each center. We can bring that together for the benefit and things that have been done in a way that at one center we can bring that over to benefit the entire agency. So for the workforce, it's a major change, because they're the norms that they're used to, the reporting structures have changed significantly for our workforce. For us in a leadership role, I was a former center CIO and now taking on this enterprise role. So I bring with me that center orientation and that knowledge of how the centers operate, and trying to bring those best practices to the table and help our workforce bring all the talent that they've got to bear for the benefit of the mission as the agency pivots.
And upgrading IT systems is a government-wide issue. NASA has an enormous amount of data that you're dealing with. So you really have to move to the cloud.
Yes, we do. Especially if you look at our science exploration areas, I mean, the amounts of data that they're ingesting are amazing. And so, clearly the cloud has come along at a time that's been very beneficial to us as we shift from more bricks and mortar data centers and traditional ways to store that data and then disseminate it. The cloud gives us opportunities to make that more efficient, to be more effective at getting that data out into the hands of the people that it's intended to. And
where are you on the timeline with that?
Well, actually, I'd say roughly about 10 years ago when cloud kind of came into the limelight, our organization saw an opportunity to try to get ahead of some of the requirements that we were starting to hear about. And so we set up a model where we first wanted to broker cloud services, make it easy for our mission customers to get access. Let's handle the authentication, let's handle the security, let's handle the network bandwidth needs that go from NASA to the internet to the cloud providers. Let's handle the acquisition aspects. Let them just get it on demand and let us handle the back office stuff. So we've been doing that for 10 years. And if you just kind of look at the cloud usage, the growth, it's just really been amazing. And so I think that from our customers, what we're hearing is that's an effective thing for us to do to allow them to focus on their mission. Let us handle that side of the IT service delivery.
And Mike, what strategies are you putting in place to be ready for cyber threats during the transformation?
So during the transformation, I will be upfront, we were actually very fortunate. We had started already expanding our virtual private network connections across our enterprise, just because that's something we needed to do to put more security in, offer greater bandwidth, and options to when our users work remotely from home and stuff like that. So as the pandemic kind of happened and transitioned on, we found ourselves where we were sitting in a good spot around that. The other thing that we did was we worked not only from a security standpoint, looking inward at NASA, but as the CISO, I reached out to other CISOs across the federal government, and we shared best practices as we were learning them and stuff, right? Because we were all kind of in this together to understand, what we could do, what we couldn't do. This included all agencies, and especially CISA played a big role in this, DHS, from their standpoint in that. But again, we worked as a federal government sharing information with each other because, again, our model shifted. It wasn't, I'll call it protect the castle, if you will. Now the castle is spread out because all of our devices are at home. So we basically had to switch to a different model of how we were basically going to protect and monitor all of our devices being remote off of our network. The good thing was we'd already started kind of shuffling to a zero trust architecture before it was recently put out as a mandate by the president. But so we were kind of already going down that route, and we've already kind of started shifting that into some of our cloud infrastructure already that's operational today.
And when we talk about cloud migration, do you account for different levels of security within that?
Oh, absolutely. Everything goes back to when we have a mission that needs to stand up something. Part of that is understanding what's the sensitivity of that data. At NASA, we have various things of that because we've got a lot of science data that is what we consider low data. It's sensitive. We give it away to the public and stuff, right? But the integrity of that data is very important because when scientists and researchers utilize that data that we give away to the world to use, we want to ensure that the data that we bring down, the integrity of that data is correct so that all their analysis and stuff like that is precise of what they need it to be and around that. But then when you move over to other parts of our infrastructure and you start thinking, human space flight and stuff like that, we have a lot of very sensitive data and things that we do in our network that we need to really protect and stuff. So it's a balance within our network of things that we have open, that we go out, that we allow anyone to access, and then very secure data that we need to really protect, and only those that need access get access to that data.
Neil, what happens when you have legacy systems and they're just too old to upgrade?
Well, that's a real problem in NASA because, I mean, many of our missions span decades. And so, many of our missions attempt to capitalize on that infrastructure, those applications, ground systems, tracking systems that have worked well and have been very reliable over the years. But as technology moves forward and other aspects of the infrastructure move forward, and we have to keep up with it, it does present a challenge where, we've got legacy applications both on the institutional side of the house and the mission that work well, but don't work well anymore with new digital footprints and technology solutions that are coming to bear. So it's a matter of sometimes of risk and looking at the risk posture of those systems and the risk acceptance we're willing to consider. Sometimes, though, it's a matter of it's time to start laying the groundwork and making priorities around those investments to get those upgraded. And that's tough because, like I said, some of these systems, some of the vendors aren't even around anymore for some of these legacy systems. So it's a challenge for us. Again, it gets back to a lot of our missions span such long periods of time, and they need that reliability, and it's a good thing. But again, it doesn't always work well with other things. So.
And Mike, I would imagine it would be difficult to secure those legacy systems when the vendors aren't even around anymore.
Oh, absolutely. So in my world at NASA, we have good end of life and bad end of life, right? Yep. Good end of life is what we kind of identify as some of these legacy systems that we're still bringing very valuable science data back around that. And Neil pointed something out that I want to pull the string on, and that's risk management. That's exactly what our role is around that. So we work very closely with the missions to understand what the risk is to our infrastructure and work with them of how we actually go to secure about that so that they can continue with their missions but not expose risk to the rest of our enterprise or other missions.
And Neil, a lot of money goes into this transformation and modernization. How are you measuring the efficiency and the cost effectiveness and the cost savings of this transformation?
Well, that's a challenge because you got to start with a solid baseline, and because of the model we've had in the past where it's been fairly decentralized, those are sometimes hard to come by. But we are in the process of, and as we transform, we're also trying to transform how we measure performance. And really what we want to do is to, as we contemplate these investments, and there's demand outstrips supply many times. I mean, there's so many needs and the dollars aren't always there. So it's how do we assess the value of what we're doing of that investment? And then before we spend a dime, how can we do a better job of identifying the outcomes that we're looking to get? And incrementally, as we move through in that investment, are we meeting those interim milestones? Are we on a trajectory to get those? So we've got work to do, and actually part of our transformation is how we're establishing different processes for our performance measurements. So I think in the past that hasn't, again with the model we've been under, hasn't lent itself to this model. So we really are having to rethink that.
Mike, I want to ask you about something that came up. This was a week before the launch of the James Webb Telescope in 2021. Mm-hmm. The Log4j vulnerability was discovered.
Yes.
A week before launch. Tell us what happened.
So we worked very closely with our James Webb program management team, to make sure that security was in place all along the way, because again, that was a multi-year build out on that. And then again, they're launching from French Guiana the week before Christmas, or actually on Christmas Day. And about a week before, Log4j vulnerability came out, not impacting just the federal government or NASA. This was a worldwide, very critical vulnerability that the world, if you will, was scrambling upon. What we did learn was that James Webb was impacted by this. But as we worked closer with the team to understand what the risk was, what we learned was because the James Webb team had worked closely with us on security for the number of years of the build out of that, we were able to do a few things to work with them to put some controls in place, some security controls in place that allowed that launch to still happen, as we all saw. And we actually launched plus 60 days We applied all the patches to the James Webb. It's all secure. It is now, but the world never knew that it was vulnerable at that time. So it's something we shared, of course, and stuff. But again, because of the due diligence of that team and working with this and taking cybersecurity very seriously, it paid off on the end, because that's something that you can't account for. If you're using third-party software, you can't account that all of a sudden they're going to have a vulnerability right before your launch and stuff. So it really kind of paid off that they did all their due diligence. Where we've actually worked across the rest of our missions is we've had a couple of conferences since then with the other parts of our missions, and we've brought in the James Webb program manager to share that story so that the rest of our missions could kind of hear and understand exactly what happened to them and how working closely on cybersecurity over the number of years that they did kind of really paid off in the end for them.
You talked about the pandemic shutdown and the challenges that posed. You did something called red teaming on that. Explain what that was and what did you learn from it?
Sure. So during the pandemic, because again, things have kind of really changed in the way that we were doing business. And I'll give you for instance, normally when we bring new people, whether they're government employees or contractors or partners on, and we issue them something as simple as a laptop, right? That's always been an in-person thing you did in the building. You go to the IT office and you stand there and you sign for your equipment. They issue it to you and all that. When the pandemic happened, that caused a problem because we didn't want people coming into the building. We didn't want people doing face-to-face, right? We wanted people to work from home. So that team actually falls underneath Neil, that's responsible for issuing laptops. And so they switched a process of where, just like we're used to now with, getting packages dropped off at our front doors almost every day, we started shipping laptops as well. Well, what I had my team do, I have a red team that works for me that basically tries to do, I'll call nefarious things to us before the bad people do. I actually had them, a couple of people on that team, receive laptops just like they were brand new users, and that assuming that, let's just say that those packages were stolen off the porch, what could they do? What we learned was we didn't have the security in place that we thought we had, and they were able to do what they do as really good from a red team standpoint. So they identified some lessons learned, and we worked with Neil's team to actually tighten that security up. And we've since retested, and we're in a much better place now. But again, that's just it. It's not just making sure that we work to do the security, but I have a team that goes out and is actually testing us to make sure that we're secure. And I also work with CISA on that. We've brought in CISA to Department of Homeland Security to actually do red team against us as well.
And Neil, your perspective on that, as far as what was unique about NASA's approach to that shutdown?
Well, one thing, I was very thankful that Mike alluded to this, that we had, about the 5 years run up to 2020, we had started making those investments in shift to the cloud, upgrading our infrastructure for remote, mostly because we knew that the agency was going to push more into telework, and we were also thinking about disaster recovery, things like that. So we were very fortunate in that the timing of that we were ready. But I'll say, for instance, I think our peak VPN usage was around 3,500 concurrent users. We shot up to about 50,000, 55,000 within a weekend. So the uniqueness there was for us is we were ready, but we had to fine tune, right, to meet the demand, and then to meet things like, okay, how do I get laptops to interns? How do we onboard them? New employees, things like that. So we really had to rethink our whole support model and processes and really get out of the box on it. And we moved very quickly. And luckily, we've got a great partnership with Mike to help us where we might move a little bit aggressively to try to meet the needs of the customer, step back a little bit and rethink some of that. We also had to, we were pivoted to the cloud, so we were at a good place. I would say we were kind of at a beachhead, but we were ready to explore new capabilities. We had a roadmap for that, but that roadmap had to accelerate significantly with the vast majority of our users at home. So with Mike's team, I won't say we shortcutted, we were more aggressive in our assessment of those capabilities that we were wanting to move in the hands of the customers a little more efficiently. So we streamlined that process. We didn't cut corners, but our ability to get to a point where we could authorize to operate new capabilities was it was quite the ride.
And finally, Mike, I want to ask you about measuring success. What does it look like from your perspective?
So from my perspective, it's honestly, for measuring success on my end, it's not just about, I'm going to call it securing NASA's infrastructure, and I'll call it keeping all the bad guys out of it. It gets back to, again, what Neil said when we kicked off, and that was, it's about the success of the missions. So when you see things like, the Artemis launch that recently happened and stuff like that, right? That's my success, right? The NASA, we did what we needed to do to do our science, to do exploration in space, and things around that. So again, to be honest with you, I want to be the silent partner in the background. That's just, we're making sure that things stay secure as NASA's missions are being being worked and done around the world and off planet.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thanks so much for the discussion. Nice to have you.
Thank you very much.
Agency in Motion, NASA, is sponsored by Deloitte. Learn more at www.deloitte.com/US/space.
Welcome back. Joining me now is Sam Kaprelian, a principal at Deloitte and U.S. Consulting Space Leader. Sam, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Deloitte is known as a tax and auditing firm. So some people might be wondering, why are you talking about technology? Give me a little bit, an idea of your expertise.
Sure. Well, it's a great question. We get asked that a lot. Deloitte's over 175 years old, founded in 1845. We are over 400,000 people worldwide. And you're right, our roots are really very much rooted in tax and audit. And we've built on that heritage of trust over the last 150 years. And we've become a powerhouse in consulting and systems integration. And now with over 400,000 people, as I mentioned, we'll do $60 billion in revenue, and nearly half of that is consulting. We have top relationships with all of the major platform players, whether it be Amazon Web Services, Google, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Oracle, SAP, Workday, and goes on. We are recognized as a top integrator by Gartner and many other industry watchers. So we come with a lot of background and depth, both in the commercial space as well as in the public sector.
So in talking about NASA's digital transformation, is there anything really unique about what they're doing?
Not hugely unique. Lots of government agencies now are really pursuing this approach around consolidation, simplification, standardization, and NASA's been on this journey, and they're really seeing a lot of success. It's not very unique, though. Most agencies are going after the same objectives, with tightening budgets, with a pace of technology that's very difficult to keep up with, and the need to really get your arms around simplifying the business.
Well, speaking of simplifying, NASA has 10 research centers, they have a headquarters, and as they go through this process of standardizing, consolidating, what are the technology solutions that are available to them?
There are numerous solutions, and Mike and Neil talked about many of those. One of the ones that people are looking at is around hybrid work and how the various technologies tie in there. Now, they had amazing success. You think about, you had the James Webb launch, you had the Artemis launch. That all was happening, all the background work over the last 2 or 3 or more years, and a lot of that was remote. And so, hats off to their organization for being able to pull that off. The technologies, though, there are a number of them that could be deployed. I know that many agencies throughout COVID especially started to think about VDI, for example. And the ability to have a virtual infrastructure, this gives us all kinds of opportunity to improve security and controls, access and identity management. It also applies to a lot of cost consolidation and cost savings potential. So that's one example. The other piece of it is thinking about all of your devices that you have out there remotely. Historically, when you had thousands or tens of thousands of people, both employees as well as contractors, as NASA does, coming into the office every day, you had a lot more control over that infrastructure and those devices. Now, with such a remote and decentralized kind of a scenario, you've got to have a lot more capability around your asset management. and your ability to understand which devices are touching the network and who's accessing which pieces of the applications and the data.
So in addition to the technology piece, there's also things like process, workforce, culture, and sometimes that's really the hard part.
It is. So often the technology, as you just mentioned, is not as complex. But when you're thinking about some of the things that NASA's been going through around around consolidation and simplification, bringing standardized approaches together into a centralized environment versus having each one of the mission areas having their own technology, their own capability, it opens up complexity. And so it's not easy. But if you're able to achieve that centralization, you can drive cost takeout, you can drive a lot more efficiency and higher quality outcomes.
You know, we talked in the last segment about the pandemic shutdown and the need to all of a sudden go remote and putting cybersecurity really at the forefront. What is working in the private sector that can be applied in the federal space?
I mentioned VDI, which is being used quite a bit across the private sector. The ability to have authorization and authentication at the network and at the application level. In other words, you have a VPN, but then once people are behind your firewall and on your platform, where can they navigate throughout the network? And then once they're into an application, what can they actually access? So situations like where NASA operates, for example, thousands of contractors and many other researchers and university personnel that might have access to their data and their systems, they're going to have varying degrees of access to the system. And in the commercial space, a lot of folks are taking advantage of that kind of a technology to have that level of control and understanding around who's accessing what and at what time.
And cloud migration obviously plays a big role in an agency's ability to integrate their services. What are some of the key strategy issues that NASA should be aware of and think about?
Well, cloud migration is not a new topic for them, as they talked about, but more broadly speaking, when you think about the cloud, you have to think about the workloads, and you have to put the people first, so the user experience first, and think about where we can make the biggest impact. That's typically where we start, is the workload, and then on the people side of it. There's a huge opportunity to migrate and to refactor capabilities and platforms. They talked about some of the legacy platforms that they've got that go back maybe 30 or more years, and that can often be a very big challenge. We have a tool at Deloitte called InnoWake, and we've helped some significant, let's call them federal agencies oriented around aeronautics and space, think about their migration of their platforms through our proprietary tool. But what you need to think about when you're migrating beyond the workload is the business case and the transition plan from a user standpoint. And those are some of the key things that we think about.
All right. Well, Sam, nice to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Agency in Motion NASA, sponsored by Deloitte. This is the latest installment of our Agency in Motion series. For more information about NASA and the digital transformation, go to govmatters.tv/AIM and scroll down to NASA. For the Government Matters Thought Leadership Network, I'm Mimi Geerges.